27 Club is not something that anybody strives to be a part of. It's a large group of talented artists who all died at the same age, 27. Because there are just so many members, it has led some people to speculate that there could be a dark explanation lurking below the surface. After all, it is a little weird. How many 27-year-olds do you know personally that have died? The idea of this phenomenon first gained traction in the early 70s after a string of loved musicians died, one after the next. These included Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison. Sadly, the phenomenon is still going strong today. It has claimed members through every decade. The newest members include Amy Winehouse and Anton Yelchin. Here are 5 members of the 27 Club, along with the stories of their deaths and autopsies.
Janis Joplin was an undisputable star. There will never be another recording artist like her. She had such grit and soul behind her voice that it was as if you could feel every outstanding moment she experienced in her life. She performed at a music festival in 1967, and just like that, she was touring and had a huge fan base. She was just that good. In a tragic twist, she only had a few more years on this earth. In the fall of 1970, Joplin was finishing up her album Pearl in LA, which would go on to be her biggest yet. Sadly, she didn't get to enjoy the success. She was found dead inside of her hotel room. She had a small amount of bloody mucus in her mouth and 2 fresh hemorrhagic punctures on her left arm. Her arm also revealed healed puncture marks. She had a pink-tinged foam in her trachea, and her upper respiratory tract was moderately congested. Her lungs had edema or fluid buildup. Portions of her brain tissue was also congested, which means that there was an obstruction in blood flow prior to her death. Her liver showed fatty changes, which is abnormal at her age of 27 and could be a result of her substance use. Her death wasn't pinpointed until her toxicology results came back, which showed a lethal level of a substance I cannot name that starts with an H. Her death is classified as accidental.
Jimi Hendrix was a music legend who needs no introduction, but just in case you aren't familiar, he was one of the most influential electric guitarists, singers, and songwriters. In the days leading up to his death, he complained of feeling drained and developed flu-like symptoms. He also suffered from long-term insomnia, which often brought along anxiety. On September 18, 1970, he phoned his manager and left a message on his answering machine which said, "I need help bad, man." These were his last known words. A short time later, he was found unresponsive in his girlfriend's apartment. The only clue found in his external examination was slight discoloration around his mouth. His internal examination revealed foamy stomach bile with chunks and mucus in his lungs and airways. His lungs were also heavy and congested, with a red and purple rash to the tissue caused by burst surface blood vessels. This is evidence that his death was likely caused by asphyxiation after aspirating vomit into his lungs. Further testing revealed that he was heavily sedated by a barbiturate sleep aid. This medication not only depresses respirations, but also put him in a deep sleep. That means that he wasn't conscious when he vomited, and his position caused him to breathe that vomit into his lungs, which obstructed his breathing. This resulted in the deadly asphyxiation. His death is classified as an accident. After spending the last year exhausting all sources trying to retrieve Kurt Cobain's autopsy, I have come to the conclusion that no member of the media has ever seen it and no member likely ever will. The details that we do know leave big, lingering questions. On April 5, 1994, vocalist, guitarist, and frontman to the band Nirvana tragically joined the 27 Club. He was found dead 3 days later by an obvious gunshot wound to the head. He had a Remington 20-gauge shotgun lying on his chest pointed towards his chin. Also found on the scene was his famous final note. Just days prior, Cobain abruptly and secretly left a rehab facility. His toxicology report is one of the most puzzling aspects of his death. A sedating benzodiazepine known as Valium was detected. Additionally, a shocking level of morphine was found. An illicit substance that cannot be named but starts with an H is metabolized into morphine. His level was 1.52 milligrams per liter of blood. 0.5 milligrams is considered a fatal level, so his was 3 times that. It's hard to imagine that even with a high tolerance, he would have been able to function enough to pull the trigger. Aside from the type of gun used and toxicology, very little else is known. In fact, the exact location of his gunshot wound has never been confirmed. We can only hypothesize based on where the gun was found. In 2014, Kurt's case was given a second look by a detective who confirmed the initial findings. New photos of the death scene were released, but they did not provide any new clarity on the situation. Amy Winehouse was definitely amongst the greatest singers in the world. She wasn't shy about her struggles with addiction. Her fourth biggest hit was her song Rehab. Sadly, the struggles she so soulfully sang about cut her life and career far too short. On July 31, 2011, she was found dead inside of her London apartment by her bodyguard. He said that in the days prior, she spent her time drinking, listening to music, browsing YouTube, and watching TV. On that tragic day, she was awake past 2 a.m., so he wasn't surprised to find her sleeping at 10 and chose to let her rest. At 3 p.m., he tried to wake her and noticed she hadn't moved a muscle since earlier that morning. He watched her chest, but it did not rise. There was an absence of a pulse. Her examination revealed that her vital organs were completely healthy, with the exception of minor fatty liver disease brought on by chronic drinking. She wasn't actually slowly killing herself over time, but simply drank way too much the evening prior. Her toxicology report found that she had 350 milligrams of alcohol per 100 milliliters of blood. This equates to a blood alcohol level of just over 0.4, which is 5 times the legal limit. Despite her lung tissue being in healthy condition, both lobes were congested and her airways filled with a foamy substance, which is indicative of respiratory failure. The foam is a result of saliva pooling as the lungs struggle to breathe. It basically oxygenizes it, causing it to foam up until breathing stops altogether. All signs point to this happening in her sleep. She passed out from the effects and never woke up. Anton Yelchin was only 27 when he died suddenly in a freak accident. He already had an impressive resume as an actor with roles in over 65 projects, including Star Trek and Terminator Salvation. His full autopsy has never been released, but I feel that I finally found enough information to make this video. Anton never surfaced at a rehearsal, triggering concern. At around 1 a.m. on June 19, 2016, friends arrived at his home to find a harrowing and confusing scene. Anton was found pinned between a brick pillar gate and his Jeep Grand Cherokee. He had suffered obvious crushing injuries and was unresponsive. A recall notice had just been issued for his model Jeep the month prior, which stated, "Drivers may inadvertently fail to achieve the park position before exiting." It's theorized that he may have put the vehicle in neutral, causing it to roll down his inclining driveway. Anton suffered crushing fractures to his rib cage caused by the immense force exerted from the Jeep. This left both lung lobes vulnerable. They too were compressed by the force, making it impossible to breathe. Additionally, he suffered severe head injuries. These injuries were likely sustained from both hitting the metal bars of the gate as well as from exerted pressure. His cause of death is blunt traumatic asphyxiation secondary to chest trauma. Once his lungs were crushed, it immediately triggered hypoxia or inadequate oxygen in tissue to sustain life. It wasn't an instant death, but death likely occurred within 1 minute of the accident. Many of the members of the 27 Club did have high-risk habits. Being a rock star oftentimes comes along with a rock star lifestyle. That means dabbling in things like cocaine and heroin, which are 2 of the deadliest drugs. I personally feel that a lot of these deaths have way more to do with that than they do with any kind of curse. What do you think?